What is the governor doing? What has the government done towards also solving the housing crisis? Because after the water crisis in Enugu State, the next big thing or big challenge we have in the state is the housing crisis. Some people argue that the water scarcity or the water crisis in Enugu State is just within the Enugu urban area. Now I begin to ask some of these kind of people who make this assertion whether they are very realistic, or is it those that never goes to their hometown. In my own hometown, for instance, a lot of people actually struggle to find water. You go long distances to fetch water. And then there are a few boreholes that were actually privately built within those areas. And then you see the rush. All right, that goes to tell you a long way that yes, even in the rural areas, they have the challenge of water. Any government that is able to come into Enugu State and solve the nagging water issue within the state, you've cut the problem of Ndi Enugu by half. I believe that the governor never foresaw the challenges that were inherent in the supply chain for the water. It's not about generating. So when you say downstream, upstream, the average Enugu man does not understand that those explanations. Now what they want to see is that you promise them water and then they've seen water. You promise them this and they've seen it. If they are yet to say it, then the explanations literally most times goes nowhere. Politicians who worked under Buruburu were actually criticizing Peter Mba because obviously he wasn't really sharing money, right? He's not the type of leader that you sing praises for him and then he doles out cash, just like the previous regime had done. You cater for people's stomach infrastructure without really looking deep into the real problems of the people who elected you to be into that office. People to lead are the black people. Reason being that most black people are not literally very sincere with themselves. Talk more of being very sincere with the leaders that they follow. Most times, or most often than not, you see a lot of political jobbers who stays in the corridors of power year in, year out without knowing the nitty-gritty of leadership itself. All they hunt for or all they always seek at each given point is their self-interest. Yes, we might agree that they say that leadership, politics, because it's politics and leadership is not the same thing. You can be a political leader or a political being without being a leader yourself. One of the basic challenge of leadership is the followers, those who follows the leader, or those who calls themselves the stakeholders in the leadership struggle or gameplay. Because leadership for me, or politics, is a game, right? That is why you see most often than not a group of leaders, a man in position of authority or leadership might have the interests of the people at heart, but over time that leadership goal will derail. It's not because the leader have changed himself, it's because of the nature of people that he surrounds himself with. A people that most times he feels that they are like-minded people, but over time you lose it. And then when you do not serve the interest of these cabals, they begin to see you as a threat. And then they work, either they confront you physically or they begin to walk on the ground towards seeing that you are removed. Because if you come to Enugu State, for instance, a lot of the formal politicians who worked under Buruburu were actually criticizing Peter Mba because obviously he wasn't really sharing money, right? He's not the type of leader that you sing praises for him and then he doles out cash, just like the previous regime had done. You cater for people's stomach infrastructure without really looking deep into the real problems of the people who elected you to be into that office. A lot of these people will come out and tell you that they did this for you, they did that for you, so you have to give them contract. And then the next thing they do is they defraud the state of their hard-earned money. And then when you look for people who you feel will actually take up that responsibility and execute your project, they begin to play the ethnic game card. They begin to play, ethnic jingoism. All right, Oyeroye Yoruba contract, Oyeroye Hausa contract. But they themselves, like for instance, if you look at the smart school, there were stories about some of those structures that actually fell. And then if you look deep down, you see that that contract was awarded either to an Enugarian or an Igbo man himself. And then he failed because he was looking for cheap materials. He's looking for profit rather than trying to build solid structures. A lot of the SAs or media, a lot of the defendant of the governor, most times whenever you come out and then you're saying some plain truths, you say a lot of things as he hurts the people, they begin to fight you, not because you're not saying the right thing, but it's not welcoming to them. It's not in tandem with what they've been telling the governor himself. Obria. Now they tell the governor what they feel that the governor wants to hear. And then the governor might think he's doing well, just like the previous governor of the state, Ifa Ugu, I thought he was doing well. And then unfortunately for him, while he was failing, the most shocking part was that he failed in his own home. If he had failed in other places, we would have said yes, it's because he's not from that side. But when you fail, when a leader fails in his own homestead, he says a lot, right? Now we understand that Peter Mba is doing a lot in Enugu State currently. He's actually trying to give Enugu a new shape. He has been able to, some of the previously moribund companies that existed in the state, he's been able to give it a new lease of life, right? You talk about the presidential hotel, you talk about Niger gas, you talk about how many would you mention and leave the other? But yeah, there are still an avalanche of previously government infrastructure that was left to rot. Some of them become a white elephant project. Now, one amongst them, you look at the state secretariat that Sullivan Ihanacho Chime actually started, right? And then when you go behind the state CID, you see a very gigantuan part of that structure that was left unfinished. And that structure has been like that. Now, another question is, we also know how good our people are with maintenance. You go to the completed part of the secretariat, you see that that structure is not well taken care of. It's not well catered for, right? It's already dilapidated just within how many years? 16 years or let's say 18 years of running that place. You go to the toilet, you come around the toilet areas, you see how smelly it is, right? Now, it goes a long way to tell you also how much Enugu needs water. Some people argue that the water scarcity or the water crisis in Enugu State is just within the Enugu urban area. Now I begin to ask some of these kind of people who make this assertion whether they are very realistic or is it those that never go to their hometown. In my own hometown, for instance, a lot of people actually struggle to find water. You go long distances to fetch water. And then there are few boreholes that were actually privately built within those areas. And then you see the rush. Alright, that goes to tell you a long way that yes, even in the rural areas, they have the challenge of water. And I always say this persistently and continuously, that any governor or any government that is able to come into Enugu State and solve the nagging water issue within the state, you've cut the problem of Ndi Enugu by half. Because a lot of these hotels they are building within Enugu State, they need water to operate. A lot of the industries needs water to operate. Domestic use of water cannot be overemphasized. Everybody needs water in Enugu State to function properly and appropriately. All right. During the rainy season, the water crisis is lessened because a lot of the wells are actually flowing, right? But once we get to dry season, all or most of them dries up, except those who are opportune to actually sink a borehole. Now, I do not see it as a very big challenge that the state could actually fix the water problem. Yes, I believe that the governor never foresaw the challenges that were inherent in the supply chain for the water. It's not about generating. So when you say downstream, upstream, the average Enugu man does not understand that those explanations. Now what they want to see is that you promise them water and then they've seen water. You promise them this and they've seen it. If they are yet to say it, then the explanations literally most times goes nowhere. And then another big challenge is, what is the governor doing? What has the government done towards also solving the housing crisis? Because after the water crisis in Enugu State, the next big thing or big challenge we have in the state is the housing crisis. We remember that under Che Maroke Nnamani, we had the Norman Lenda housing estate that he built and a whole lot of other ones. And then under Buruburu, he tried doing something with the Rangers estate he was building and some others. But the challenge always remains that these structures are built and then the politicians themselves, those who are, the healers of the government actually buys all these things up and then it ends up in the hands of the upper middle class. Those are the politicians themselves. Now those civil servants within the state, how have you been able to help them? Because demands, in fact, there is always a demand push inflation in the housing sector. A lot of people are looking for houses within Enugu State. And then currently you cannot see any house, almost 2 or 3 bedroom flats in Enugu State goes from at least minimally from 900,000 to 1 million, 1 point. And now a civil servant who earns approximately 70 to 80,000, how is that person able, or how will he be able to actually live within the town and still pay for rent and then still struggle to look for water to use, right? You see that it's a kind of a snowball effect. right? It picks up a lot of the debts to pay. You have a lot of bills to pay, and then the salaries equally are not commensurate to the expenditures you incur on a monthly basis. Now, I will always tell those in government that if you want the well-being of your people, develop housing schemes. At least in a year, you can put it upon yourself that within a year that the state government will build at least 1,000 housing units, and then put a scheme in place to ensure that these housing units are actually being taken up by real civil servants, those who need it, and not the political, those in politics actually taking over them. Then you will now see that there is a discrepancy between policy intent and then policy outcome in that sphere, because the moment the politicians are taking over them, the civil servants are left without nothing. You can develop a housing scheme maybe in a place like Amudu, Apugo, and then build roads that leads to those places, connect them to the cities and towns, so that accessibility to those places will not be a nagging headache, and you will see people move, and that will also lead to the decongestion of the Enugu urban area. All right, and then you can see that with the movement of Co-Camp from where it is now, because if as you might know, Co-Camp was not designed as a business district as it has turned out to be now. Co-Camp was a purely residential area, and now the moment that traders and petty traders have taken over the streets of Co-Camp, you see a lot of traffic congestion within that area. The government, yes, has done or is doing great by trying to relocate them, but there are other stuffs that the government needs to do. Develop those peri-urban areas within Enugu City, build access roads to them, develop our housing schemes, and then this will help people move down to those areas.